Houston has finally allocated $6 million to test their backlog of rape kits, and it has led to some very, very good results, all right? So it's evidence from more than 6,000 rape kits that went untested for years, decades in some cases in Houston, and they've turned up 850 hits in the FBI's nationwide database of DNA profiles, okay? So all these rape victims did what they're told to do. They reported the rape, they went to the doctor, they did a rape kit, which of course includes physical DNA evidence of the person who has raped them. And then the state's like, meh, it costs too much money to test these rape kits. It could cost anywhere between $500 and $1,000. And so for decades in some cases, these rapes went, unprosecuted, not investigated, and as a result, these rapists were able to go out there and rape again and again and again without any consequences.
So now that's a verifiable fact, because Houston finally started doing the testing on the rape kits in 2013. So they've now gone through the 6,663 rape kits. There's already been 29 cases that are brought. 6 people have been convicted. And they also know that some of the people who they now know had done the rapes in the past committed more crimes in the meanwhile. Mm-hmm. They didn't get arrested, so they continue to commit crimes. And those crimes are also on the record. Okay, so this is a story that really shocks the conscience and exposes my naivete. When I was growing up, if you told me, I wouldn't have believed this. And not just growing up. I mean, I wouldn't have believed this until really recently. Like, why wouldn't the cops use the rape kits? That doesn't make any sense. Money, rape is among the most serious crimes there is. If you're not going to spend the money on figuring out who the rapist is, what the hell would you spend the money on?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, look at all the money we waste on the war on drugs and all that stuff. And the thing is, I was naive. It turns out it is a matter of priorities, and for the people, oftentimes guys, running these departments, it wasn't a priority for them.
I think that most political issues are looked upon as investments by politicians, right? So a good investment is to funnel money into the war on drugs, because private contractors, for-profit prisons, and so many other entities make so much money off the war on drugs, right? So, hey, these politicians are getting funded by these entities, so why not keep pushing for the war on drugs? Going to war. Private contractors make money off going to war. So we do waste our resources. That's the reason why we don't fund education nearly as much as we fund other things. That's the reason why we don't fund, programs that test these rape kits. Who's going to make money off of that? We're not going to make money off of that. We're just going to help people that have been freaking raped.
Yeah, it shocks the conscience, man. It's not that much money. It's just $6 million in Houston, right? Yeah. So I know $6 million is not a tiny amount, but for a city the size of Houston, it's not a gigantic ask. I mean, if you ask people of Houston, who my guess is are not happy about taxes, but I'll raise your taxes by whatever the number is, which would be a tiny, tiny number, so that we can test the rape kits. That ballot measure would win, what, 98 to 2, 95 to 5? I don't know, right? It would. Who's going to say, no, don't bother figuring out who raped my wife, my daughter, me? Who would say that, right? Except the people in charge.
I know.
Isn't that amazing? And by the way, it's not just a Texas problem.
I have a graphic on that.
Right, go ahead.
But before I get to that, I also want to tell you, even though they managed to find 850 DNA matches, some people have been charged, although I would argue not nearly enough. Graphic number 23. Charges have been filed against 29 people, 6 of whom have been convicted since the city launched its effort in 2013 to test the rape kits, some of which dated back nearly 3 decades, which is so ridiculous. I can't even believe that it took that long.
Statute of limitations has run on some of those cases, so even if we know exactly who did it, in some of the cases, they will never be brought to justice.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So in terms of untested rape kits in other states, it's a really big problem. So there are more than 12,000 in Memphis, Tennessee, more than 11,000 in Detroit, and 4,700 in Cleveland.
So all over the country, these are just 4 examples, including Houston. Mm-hmm. But all over the country, people thought, rape, who cares? I don't want to spend that extra money to figure out who did it. Look, I was outraged when my car got stolen, our office got broken into. This is many years ago, right? And no one bothered to figure out who did it. I'm like, look, it was a coordinated attack in 2 different spots in the city happened on the same night, that's a cause of concern. Now I realize, who was I kidding? Unless you're super powerful, they're never going to bother trying to figure out any case, right? I mean, yeah, I would much rather have them figure out the rape cases than my case where the car got stolen, the office got broken into. I mean, the rape is so much more serious. If they're not taking care of that, of course they're not going to take care of the other things. And so these are the guys who oftentimes tell us, no, 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 we had to take extreme action, we had to do the chokehold, and we had to shoot somebody, and we had to do all that stuff because, you know, we have a tough job.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that tough if you're not doing it. And understand that there's different levels of justice, the levels within the justice system here. So there are the cops on the front lines, and then there are the guys, the prosecutors, who choose to either prioritize or not prioritize. There's the guy who gives the order, test the rape kits, don't test the rape kits, right? But the whole justice system up and down is warped because it has completely different priorities than the rest of us.
Absolutely. But it's good to know that at least in Houston, they're using their resources to do this. And it's important for people to hold other cities and other states accountable for not testing these rape kits, because this is a serious issue. These rapists are going to go out there and do it again.
I just want you to imagine the outrage if you know, cops find drug deals in the middle of going down, or marijuana. Let's just go just with weed, and they bust them and take them in and go, you know what, you guys, go ahead, take off. There's no big deal. We don't have any time or money to deal with this right now. We need to put you in jail. We'll need to even incarcerate you overnight. We'll need to try you. Just get out of here. It's not a big deal. We relate to you. The outrage, I mean, there'd be campaigns about how they let people run free, these hardened criminals. Mm-hmm. But this is just fine, and no one seems to care.
Yeah, you know, look, I don't want to overstate it, but I'm going to use an analogy here anyway. It reminds me of the lynchings, the story I did a week ago about, you know, they did a counting of all the lynchings that happened between the 1880s and 1950, basically, about 4,000 of them. In almost none of the cases had the person done anything. And nobody even bothered to figure out who did the crime in the first place. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it would involve no crime at all. But sometimes it would be a real serious crime. A 3-year-old was killed, a woman was raped, etc. But nobody gave a shit about finding out who actually did it. They just wanted to lynch somebody. Yeah. And so they'd go and they'd kill somebody and then they'd feel better. So it isn't about justice. It isn't about crime solving. It's about targeting certain people. And so, anybody really think smoking weed is worse than rape? Anybody in their right mind could possibly ever say that? But we spend all those resources to get certain people at 4 times the rate as other people, yes, right? And we put them in jail. And as John Legend pointed out during the Oscars, there are now more African-American males in prison today than there were under slavery, yeah, than there were slaves under slavery. That's a mind-blowing fact, right? So all those people are in jail, but we never even bothered to figure out who did the rapes.